Good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome wherever you are. And afterwards, if you are watching this as a podcast, because I know that scheduled programming is coming to be a bit of a thing of the past. But anybody who is watching will be able to comment, and I will be able to put your comments on screen. And if you want to ask questions, we're here to answer them. It's live. Okay. Now, my guest today is a very interesting guy. He's had a full career as a GP, a general practitioner, a medical doctor, and he's retired. And now he's following his passion to be a research paleontologist. It's Jeremy Lockwood. Jeremy, how the devil are you?
Very well, thank you, John. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Good. Yes, well, I want to start in the way I usually do by asking my guests how they got to be the person they are today. Because, I mean, obviously you've had a particularly interesting journey. You've come through one career and now you're embarking on a second one.
So, well, I mean, that's really telling you the story of my life, I suppose, which I'm
briefly,
happy to do.
The nutshell version.
In a nutshell, yes. I started as a young boy having really quite an interest in paleontology, but not particularly of dinosaurs, although I read about them as a child, and they always fascinated me, even at a time when there really wasn't very much interest in dinosaurs amongst the general public. At school, I enjoyed sciences, and I wound up doing medicine, which was actually a job that I thoroughly enjoyed. But when I came sort of close to retirement, I just felt I've got to do something. I want to take something. I need a new chapter to my life. And I harked back on these sort of paleontological days as a child and thought, well, let's start going back into this again and see where it takes me.
Yeah, interesting. Because being retired is such a privilege, isn't it? I mean, you don't have to do what somebody else tells you. You can actually
work is doing what you have to do. If you don't have to do it, then it takes on a whole new level of pleasure. Yes,
exactly. Yes. So when I retired from my career as a science teacher, I had to choose between wearing a pair of slippers, learning how to smoke a pipe, and watching daytime TV, or doing something like this. So guess which I chose? Yes. So I want to talk to you a bit about being a medical doctor, because you were engaged in a Twitter thread, which I also read. I don't think I actually commented in it, but I certainly read it. And it wasn't a hashtag, but it could easily have been a hashtag, because the theme of it was, I broke the rules. And this has come about because the topical political item at the moment is how our government and its leader have broken their own rules about COVID isolation and social distancing and all that stuff. So a large proportion of the public who abided by the rules have a grievance against our leaders. And this particular thread had a number of heartrending stories about how people had to keep away from their dying relatives, and how annoyed they are at what our government's been partying while this has been going on. So as a doctor, I guess you get exposed to more terminal illness and end of life than the average person. Do you have to be a strong personality or something how do you cope with that aspect of doctoring?
Yes, it's a really interesting question, because I think certainly in general practice, and I started general practice a long time ago, and we were very much yeah, these were people that I'd known, for
Yeah.
20, 30 years.
Exactly.
I'd seen them through their ups and downs of life, and
Yeah.
yes, and then suddenly they can get a terminal illness.
Mm.
It is difficult. I mean, you do feel, you feel obviously, most of the doctors I know are, they really care. They do care for their patients.
Yeah.
It can be sometimes difficult, and there's lots of obstacles that sometimes make it look as though that maybe isn't really the case. But for most of us, we care very deeply.
Mm.
I suppose it is a job. When we see someone, we have to think of things. So someone with terminally ill with cancer or something, we're thinking about, their levels of pain. Can we do this? The drugs
Yes.
they're on, what's happening? Where do we go to next? What tests do we need to do? What do we need to keep going? So there's a lot of that wound up, but there are also those moments which are really important, where someone, who can see you as a doctor, but also as someone they know well, that
Yes.
you sometimes just have to put a hand on a hand and sort of try and understand,
Yes.
or express that. It's very difficult. I find it very difficult to put it into words, to be honest, how
Yes.
that sort of feeling goes. But it's a
Mm.
privileged position from our point of view. But
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
In that respect, sorry, you were going to say?
No, I was just going to say, sometimes I look back and there's all these people that I've known so
Yes.
well that have
Yes.
died, and
Yes. Yes.
I just wish I had almost a token, some sort of photograph, a picture.
Oh, right.
It's strange how this sort of these people that you've seen over the years, you suddenly retire and move away, and
There's nothing. Yes.
They've gone. They've gone.
Yes. No memento or anything. Yes. Well, I feel for you, because it's worse than being an undertaker or something, isn't it? Because at least it's happened when you are in the business of burying people, or conducting funerals. And I remember one particular young female GP who treated my father, and he was a lovely fellow, jokey, you got to like him immediately. And she did what she could for him. But of course, there comes a stage when nobody can do any more. And she was grieving as much as I was, I could see, because she'd come to know him in that treatment-patient relationship.
Yes, and I think that's, sometimes it's important to. I think things are slightly different these days, because I think palliative care tends to be a team of people,
Yeah.
and we discuss things. I think when I started general practice, you really were quite isolated.
Yes.
It was just you and the person, if you like. Whereas
Right.
now there's nursing teams and specialists and everything, and we talk regularly, or years ago for me now, but we did talk regularly. I think that's probably quite a good thing as well, in a way, because it stops you. It stops you sort of, you have to be objective with this. You have to make that decision. That we do know more, and
it's not good to be isolated. And I can imagine that in a situation where there is nothing further that can be done, there might be a feeling of ineffectualness. I don't know, imposter syndrome. Do doctors have these reflective problems of a psychological nature?
I think we've, I mean, death is from the moment you enter your anatomy lessons and are faced with some, dissection and things like that. It does change you a little bit, only a little. But I think I think, we can see that there's this cycle of birth and death is very evident, particularly in general practice. You see all of it happening at the time, and I think you have to accept death is going to come to us all, and make it as easy as possible. I think is foremost in my mind. So I think that's why I say there's all these other things to think of. That are so important to try and make the person as comfortable and
quality of life, not just quantity.
But not just drugs. That can be being a friend to them as well.
Yes, indeed. Yes, you have to be a pragmatist. Life is a terminal disease.
It is. Yeah.
And it's sexually transmitted. So there's that. Anyway, let's get on to fossils, because you remind me of what's her name, Susie Maidment, who I've previously. She's been my guest before, and she tells how at age 8, I think she had a stuffed Tyrannosaurus Rex or something, and she was asked by her grandfather or an elderly uncle or something what she wanted to do when she grew up, and she said dinosaurs. And of course she's almost got there, because she's not a specialist in dinosaurs. It's more stegosaurs, I think, with her, but it's a similar sort of ilk.
Well, no, stegosaurs are a type of dinosaur. So yes, she's.
Well, yes, that's right, because they stand on their hind legs, don't they?
She's a curator of dinosaurs at the NHN, Natural History Museum. So that is very much her thing. Yeah.
Yes. She explained to me, you're is it an orthosaur if your legs are out like this, and you're a dinosaur if your legs are like that?
Well, yes, that's right. Yes, so dinosaurs have these straight legs, which rather than the sprawling thing like
crocodile ones. Yes.
Right. Yes.
So
I heard dinosaur.
Yes, my daughter's keen on dinosaurs. Go away! I'm in the live stream.
Is it live?
Yes, it is live.
Properly live.
Properly live. Yes, go away.
Well, there's hundreds of people watching.
One at the moment, but there will be more. Go away. My advice, Jeremy, is never have children.
I've heard that 1,000,000 times. Shut up.
Anyway, ignoring the interruptions, which I don't normally have because I keep my door locked, but I failed today. Your childhood dream is finally coming to fruition here, isn't it? Because when you finished your career, you then up sticks and moved to the best, or one of the best paleontological locations in Great Britain.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the Isle of Wight, it's a sort of secret, really. I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe we can talk about why the island. It's Europe's hotspot for dinosaur fossils, not just nationally, and it represents a time, the Barremian period in the early Cretaceous, which is about 125 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there just aren't that many sites around the world, terrestrial land sites with dinosaur fossils on it during that period. So that makes it special as well.
Yes, so it's different from the Jurassic coast along the road here in Dorset and Devon.
Yeah, so we've the Jurassic, I mean, for dinosaurs never took to the sea. There are the Spinosaurids, and there's a lot of debate about whether they actually got into water and went for fish in a sort of predatory sort of way. But dinosaurs were not really swimmers.
No.
And even we've seen this huge Ichthyosaur discovered at Rutland.
Yes, only last week.
So this is a marine reptile, it's not a dinosaur. Although some of the papers did get that wrong.
What a papers know, eh?
And Dorset is, there's the occasional dinosaur that floated out to sea, presumably the river is opening out into the sea, and a sort of corpse of the thing floated off. But essentially, they're marine reptiles, but not dinosaurs. So dinosaurs need to be on land. So the Jurassic coast is all marine deposits, so excellent for marine life,
Yes.
but not good for dinosaurs.
Mm.
So we're a little bit after them.
Yes.
The Isle of Wight, back 125 million years ago, was a big floodplain. So it was land, but rivers were sort of opening out into it. There was probably a lot of plant life here, and storms. There were hills to the north, and we know there were quite violent thunderstorms. We find lots of charcoal that had been washed down into this flood basin. So there was presumably lightning going on and signs of huge sheet floods coming in. So great for dinosaurs. There was lots of water there and food to eat. But if they died, they got buried very often by these flood events. So we've got land here, flood events. So that's what we need for a fossil. It needs to be buried really quickly. So ideal conditions for preserving dinosaur fossils.
Yes. Well, I get involved in discussions with people because I haunt Facebook and try what I think is teaching science. I try to explain to people who misunderstand the processes, and some of them are creationists, and they don't believe that the evolution and the old Earth and the fossil record are true. So one of the things I have to point out, because they're all looking for missing links, and they're not satisfied that there's enough in the fossil record to validate evolution. Of course, that's not the only evidence for evolution, but they think it is. And so one of the things I try to explain to them is it's very difficult not only to get fossilized, but also subsequently to get discovered as a fossil. So these are big hurdles that have to be overcome. Anything that dies, first thing that happens to it is it gets eaten or rots. And to become a fossil, that's got to be prevented. So as you said, a flood burial is perfect.
There's anoxic conditions and rapid burial, and it preserves plant matter and as well as the bones. And then, of course, these things over the millions of years are deeply under the ground. So we need tectonic movements to push them to the surface. And then, I mean, I suppose if you look at the story of the discovery of dinosaurs, a lot of this was people like Gideon Mantell and William Buckland in Oxfordshire. But there were lots of quarries in those days in Georgian England and Victorian England. You know, every village, every town would need building stone, so there would be little quarries all over the place. But
sand and chalk quarries. Chalk for the lime,
So they were excavating and finding things, but a lot of that stopped now, or nearly all of it. So the Isle of Wight has marine erosion. The sea continues to batter away at its cliffs and collapse and reveal all these bones. So it's it's something that's happening all the time. And again, there's all of those factors all coming together that actually make such a productive place for dinosaur bones.
Perfect place, yes. Yes, because you have not only the sandstone cliffs. You're on the West Wight, aren't you?
Yeah.
But you have the sandstone cliffs, and you have the funneling in of the Atlantic Ocean waves to eat away at them and erode them away, and it expose the harder things that are buried in amongst them. And of course, over that number of millions of years, most fossils are not bone anymore, are they? Many of them have been replaced by rock material.
That's correct. So there's sort of water percolates around them with other minerals in them and reacts with minerals in the bone. Although it is difficult. So some fossils are almost completely replaced and have nothing to do with their original thing other than their shape. But others will have a lot of the atoms still in there, maybe bound up as different minerals. But still there, so research can still look at the various elements in them.
Yes, and the pressure that they've been under also has a transforming effect, doesn't it? Because pressure is a bit like cooking, so that can change the material.
It distorts it as well,
Yes.
unfortunately. So, I mean, it's one of the great problems on the Isle of Wight, because if you're in Utah or something like that and you see a bone sticking out of the ground, you can say, oh, well, look, put a little flag on it and sort of say, next year we'll get us some students together and we'll come along here and we'll dig it out. But with marine erosion, you know, you're fighting this incoming tide. Often in winter, you know, there's the windsurfers out there, but there's big waves coming in. And you've only got very limited time, and it's often incomplete, and it often takes days, weeks, or even years sometimes to collect a whole animal as it's being eroded out of the cliff. So we are working with very fragmentary material, which can be quite annoying at times. And there's always, and the Isle of Wight is, or if only we had a little bit more, is a common phrase that we're using when we're looking at stuff.
Yes. Have you ever been not rained off, but washed off by the tide or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it surprises me, because when we're out there, particularly in winter storms, when we're sort of down there, because often that's when all this is happening. There's always that big wave. I don't know. You think the waves are fine, and suddenly one big one comes up, and you're up to your waist in water. But we try and dress sort of fairly suitably to stop that. But then the cliffs are all dropping, and luckily you get little bits of gravel, and that will just start dropping down before several tons of it come down. So you always get that warning of a minute or two usually to step back. But and I don't know anyone who's done this that's actually been flattened yet. But it's I presume it's only a matter of time before someone does. But it's quite it's lovely though. I mean, to be out in a sort of on the beach all by yourself digging in a storm is really quite bracing.
It's a sort of variation on fishing, I suppose.
I guess it is. I get it is. Yes, they're the same thing.
As an activity. So how long did it take you to make your big discovery after you'd moved to the Isle of Wight? Did you go out the next day and stumble across a huge bone?
Well, it didn't really work out quite like that. So I mean, we've had a few discoveries in the last year. So the one that I was, I suppose, the lead author with was Brystonius simonsi, this iguanodontian, this plant-eating dinosaur. So I started my PhD, which is, if anyone's thinking of doing that in retirement, think hard, because it's a lot of work. You know, it sort of takes your life over, really. And you need an understanding family, that's for sure. But it was an enormous amount of reading. So I when I used to collect fossils here before I moved down, I was always, I was finding bones, but they were always put down. Over 90% of the bones we find were coming from two animals. One was an iguanodon, which is a big plant eater, and a slightly smaller, more gracile, less robust animal, Mantellisaurus. And I just kept thinking that the variation in these is so much. I mean, I was so used to human bones and doing human anatomy and things that, you take a radius of a human from anywhere in the world, and it looks exactly like the other one. It might be a bit bigger or smaller, but it's not, it's clearly clear what it is. And
it's so recognizably human.
Yeah. But a lot of these were showing quite a lot of variation, and that's really what sort of got me interested. Because so the first thing I had to do was learn dinosaur anatomy, which is, I mean, the language is the same, so that was a good start, if you like. But so a lot of reading, hundreds of papers, notes and things.
They still have the pentadactyl limb, don't they? This is something that goes back really long way to a common ancestor which came up with the first pentadactyl limb.
Yeah, that's right. And you can see the remnants of it. Obviously, it's like birds; they've sort of altered and changed, but essentially that was the original plan. So but yes, it's so yeah, it was just going through bones, and I had a tape measure, some calipers, a camera, a notebook, pencil. I could do sketches, and just started storing and measuring everything and photographing it, and then putting all these bones that were the same, if we take a humerus, and putting them all together on sheets on the computer, this is, so that I could flick through and think, well, this is slightly different from this, and try and look out for these slight differences. And I was finding really quite a lot of them, but as we mentioned earlier, bones get so distorted sometimes that it's really difficult to is it due to distortion, or is it a genuine thing, and this and that and the other. And that was a little bit with Bristonius why it was nice to find the bulbous nose. I mean, we'd found other differences on this, which I think would have carried the day and made it a new species regardless. But the nose was just nice because it was so obviously a different
distinctive
animal, very distinctive, and people could see it, rather than me saying it's got a slightly longer anteroventral nasal process, and you go, well, yeah, okay, but you say, no, it's got a different nose. Look, here's the nose of what is this nose. So that was really amazed that I'd missed it on my first run through with just taking photographs of things.
It was by comparison with a range of variations that you had that drew your attention to it.
Yeah, so I was trying to reconstruct the skull. So I was photographing things in their life position, if you like, so tilting it, and that's only then that I sort of realized that there was this lump on it. So it was it's just being, it's tedious in a way, but it's but quite fun. I often liken it a bit to doing a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, you say, well, that's tedious, but you can still enjoy it, really. Not that I do many puzzles, but it's just that it's that sort of, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle. It's trying to solve.
Yes. Well, back in the day when there wasn't the opportunities for entertainment and education that we now have, the princesses, I understand, used to get their servants to not tangle and clump up string in order for them to undo it as an activity for the daytime.
Right. Okay. Yes.
They had nothing better to do than solve somebody else's tangle.
Yeah.
So
we're getting back to fishing again, I think. Really.
So there is pleasure in it. So this iguanodon that's named after the village of Bryston on the west coast of the Isle of Wight, near the west coast of the Isle of Wight, just a little bit inland from the military road.
That's right.
You see, I know your neck of the woods because I am an islander. I was born on the Isle of Wight, and I've now managed to make it to the North Isle, which is where I'm currently residing. So this iguanodon, have we got any idea what its diet was, or what that nose was for? Was it
so it's difficult when we find this is all we've got is the bones. It may be
teeth.
The teeth and bones.
Yeah, because they give an idea of diet, don't they?
That they do indeed. So this was definitely a herbivore. We can tell from the teeth that it was about grinding. So it had got a beak on the end, almost a keratinous beak, which it would be good for cropping things. And then it had these banks of these teeth, and it probably moved. It could probably move its cheekbones as well. So that it had a sort of sideways as well as an up and down sort of grinding motion.
Interesting.
Because it was, it would be eating things like pine needles and equisetum, horsetail. These are really, really tough things. Silicates in them, which would wear our teeth out almost instantly. But they've got just replacement teeth coming up all the time. So you just we often find teeth where the root has all just gone and it's all worn down. And some people, the collectors, call them spitters, you know, because they presumably did just spit them out, and the next tooth grew up. So they were eating these really tough plants. But the nose is difficult, because although it's present on the skull, it could well have been exaggerated by fatty tissue or whatever. So it could just be a hint that there was actually quite a big bulbous nose on top of it, maybe with color. We really don't know, but that's just to the if we look at the proboscis monkey or the elephant seal in mammals, they've both got these big noses, and it all boils down to sex, I suppose. It's to attract females. The females will tend to go for a male with a big nose in the proboscis and the elephant seal communities, and it also wards off other males. So so it may be that it was something to do with that.
It could be sexual selection rather than fitness for the environment itself.
Yeah,
as Darwin would have outlined it, I guess. He would have used sexual selection as a possible alternative explanation for how things became modified. So when you made your major discovery, this really big bone, how did you feel?
Well, it was I mean, it was nice, because it was a very good feeling. One of the troubles was that with going through the current wisdom, there were just this Mantellisaurus and this Iguanodon were the only two of this group of dinosaurs. There's over 30 different dinosaurs on the Isle of Wight, but I was looking at the common Iguanodontians. One of the dangers was that I could have spent 6 years going through all these collections and come out at the other end saying, I've got really good evidence now that everyone was right in the first place. And that would have been good science, but it was
exactly a personal triumph.
But it would have been less interesting, I suppose. So I really wanted to see if there was a greater diversity here. So that's what made it exciting. I ran through to the curator and said, come here, have a look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this.
Which curator was this?
Well, this was of Dinosaur Isle Museum. So
Martin Munt?
Martin Munt, indeed. Yeah. Yes. So yes, that's right. So we were in Couthie, which is so there's a lot of the bones are stored away from the museum where we are, which is not a good situation, but it's the way it is. So someone has to go with you to keep an eye on things and things like that. So he was there. So he came in. He agreed that this did look, very different, and that the bone didn't look as though this was distortion, that was something else. Obviously then I got professors, and Susie Maidment, Dave Martill, who's professor at the University of Portsmouth, and Susie at the Natural History Museum, who are both my supervisors. So they had a look at it, and that, so because you mentioned imposter syndrome in medicine, but certainly in paleontology, you get this worry. Am I committing myself to something here that, and of course you might be. This is this is science. You come out with something, and when a more complete specimen is found, we may actually find more out about it. But
another of my guests was he's a professor at Bristol University. You'll know his name.
Benson.
That's right, Mike Benson, and he tells how he came up with this. What was it? The pre-Jurassic upheaval. That's not the word. And he came up with this concept, I suppose it was at that time, 30 years ago, and he was poo-pooed. But now he's gathered sufficient evidence, and everybody has formed a consensus lined up behind him. And so that's the sort of thing, particularly in the paleontology field, where unusually really for science, because most other aspects of science are not about discovering something and being the person who discovered it. Most other aspects of science are less individualized, I would say, and so paleontologists tend to feel special by virtue of what's happened, rather more so than somebody else working in, I don't know, chemistry or physics. And it's true not just in paleontology, but also in botany, for example, because if you find something new, or zoology, you can have it named after you, can't you? Which is
no, you can't. No. It's completely. It's very bad show to name something after yourself.
okay.
So if you find enough dinosaurs and describe them well enough, another paleontologist might name their dinosaur after you.
Okay. Right.
But
so that's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works. But generally, we name so with Bristonius simonsi, we named it after Keith Simmons, who lives on the island, who's collected a lot over many years and given stuff to the museum and that. So it seemed very appropriate to name the dinosaur after him.
Yes.
Whereas and another one, which was the Spinosaurids recently, Reparo Veneta, is Milneri, after Angela Milner, who from the Natural History Museum, originally described baryonyx, walkery, and has contributed hugely to the knowledge in paleontology over the years.
Okay, keep at it then, and we might get something that's Lockwoodi eventually.
Well, I don't know. I'm happy to name them. That's that. Finding one and naming one is all I need. Absolutely.
Okay. So now we've got to the stage where you've discovered this thing, and it's been recognized and named, and you're doing your PhD. Well, I've talked to a lot of people who have done PhDs, some of them who didn't complete, and some who did complete, and they talk about a gutty year 2, when you begin to wonder whether it's all worth it. Have you got to that stage yet?
Well, yeah, I've there's lots of ups and downs in it, and I think so. I mean, the main drive of what I'm trying to do is look at the variation and diversity of the iguanodontian dinosaurs. So I've found one new species, which is quite important, really, because it's this paradigm of just the two, which has been going on for over 100 years, really, has been broken, and I think that was an important step, and that's allowed us now to start looking at other bones and saying, we don't really know what these are, and let's look more closely. So there's a lot of work going on looking at that. I'm pretty confident we are going to find new animals hiding in there amongst them. But really what we'd like to do is show what's actually going on in this 6 million year period. Was there evolution going on? We know we've got a very similar river floodplain, but in the later Cretaceous, in the Dinosaur Park Formation in Alberta.
All right.
And that's got really quite nice stratigraphy. You can really make the layers out very nicely. And it's got dinosaurs, lots of dinosaurs they find there, and they find a lot of skull material, and they've got hadrosaurs, which have quite these crests and ornaments, and other types of dinosaurs which again have frills around around the back of the skull and the things. And you can actually see as you go through the layers that these ornaments are changing, so we're getting evolution, anagenesis, or evolution by sort of gradualism actually happening. And we're actually seeing different species emerging in less than 1 million years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. So if we can actually find that similar thing is actually happening on our Isle of Wight, a much more difficult problem because we get so less of the skull material and the things with the really diagnostic characters. But it's trying to piece that together. So the goal of my PhD that would really make me happy would be to actually say, I have got evidence here that of evolution, gradualism, or even of new, a faunal change going on as we've got through this 6 million years. But that's still quite a lot of work. That's documenting these bones and slotting them into different time bins and see if we can see a pattern emerging. So that's the ultimate aim. I don't know whether I'll do that, but because it's time
long term.
Yes, you're quite right. You can go. Every PhD student I spoke to talks about highs where they think, wow, I mean, the truth is, most of us are not going to change the world at all.
No.
We'll increase mankind's knowledge by that amount. But yes, other times you feel just despair, that nothing's going on. But it's been a good few months for me. I've been a bit more on the upper side of it. Good.
So have you been to Alberta yet, or do you plan to go? Or
No, I'd like to go. I haven't really done any traveling because of COVID, and I suppose that would have been one of the nice things about doing a PhD like this. So I've had a word with them, and they're very happy for me to go over there and work with them one summer. So I'd like to do that, although I can't say that that's going to be that relevant to my PhD, but it would be nice to actually see firsthand these animals and do that. So I'm lined up to do that, I hope, in the next couple of years.
Well, good luck. Yes, I hope you can. Skulls, you mentioned skulls, and I'm thinking perhaps they change more due to sexual selection rather than the rest of the body, because they're the focus of the individual.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, very much so. So, I mean, if we take the Serengeti today, there are, I think, 13 species of antelope that live on it.
Yes.
And I mean, they vary in size a lot. You've got wildebeests and things like that, as big animals, and Thompson's gazelles down, smaller dicks and things like that at the other extreme.
I went there many years ago. I visited. I did some safari touring. Yeah.
So, but you would recognize your gazelle probably on its colors and also on its horns and its head shape principally. And I think if you took all the heads away and you just gave people a few bits of the sort of postcranial skeleton, mix them all together, distorted them a bit, it would be really quite a puzzle to work out that there were 13 species going on there. Because size is difficult, because it could, is this a juvenile, or is it actually a small animal? And I mean, we can do work on looking at the bone histology to actually try and help with that, but it's at the moment. You have to saw the bone up.
The epiphyses at the end of the bones that don't solidify, don't ossify until maturity. Yes.
So yes, you can see fusion. You can see unfused bones in dinosaurs. So you can suggest that is a fairly young animal. And you can see things under the microscope. You can actually see the lines of arrested growth. These are the growth rings, a bit like tree rings. That can give you indications. But as I say, that's destructive, and a lot of museums are not happy with you sawing the bones up of the only specimen of this animal that exists.
So you mentioned that in Alberta they've got evidence of a progression from one form to another. Of course, we don't know whether that's speciation. Of course, we don't know whether the descendants would have been able to breed with the ancestral types. There's no way of telling that. But what interests me is this punctuated equilibrium? Is this, that idea where over 100,000 years, there can be big changes and then stasis for 1,000,000 or two?
Well, yeah. So if you look at the end of the Jurassic, there seems to be some evidence of a not a major mass extinction event, but certainly a drop. There was a moderate extinction event, if you like, that sort of, and you can see diversity sort of picking up in the early Cretaceous around about the time of the deposits of the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
But then quite a bit of research has also looked at the fact that this area is underrepresented. So we are starting to increasingly see that the fossil record is not, it's not as random. It's that places are good to fossil, and you get lots of fossils from them. You start seeing a lot more diversity than the Isle of Wight with its fragmentary remains and things like that. It's a lot harder to actually show what's going on. So, but you're quite right. So that's another question. Why are we different from this place? Is it genuine difference, or is there a bias going on? And there's quite a few biases going on in paleontology, partly just natural bias, that there's only so much of it. And, there's how easy is it to get to somewhere, all of these things, and even going back into history about sort of colonialism and where fossils were collected from and things like that. It's it's all tied in there with how we're interpreting the fossil records. So there's quite a lot. That's another interesting aspect, I think, on this study, is to try and see if we can tease that apart. It's not just me either. We've got a whole group, the Natural History Museum, of looking at different other dinosaurs, and we've seen quite a few meat-eating dinosaurs. The diversity of those increasing. So I think there's it's all part of the dinosaur renaissance. This interest, we've got so many students looking at it now.
More power to your elbow. I was going to ask, what about dating? You mentioned that you've got a 6 million year layer, stratum, I guess it is. But is radioisotopy any use within that, or?
No, unfortunately, it is a problem that we have on the Isle of Wight. There's really no radioactive measures that we can use. There aren't any really good fossils for dating that we can use. I mean, things like ammonites and that can be really useful in marine sediments to know what's going on, because they fossilize a lot. They're pretty ubiquitous, but we lack all that. So
they're really good fossil material, aren't they?
So it is a little bit vague. We have things like the polarity of the magnetic field of the Earth switches, and there's been quite a bit of work used doing that, looking at the rocks to see what was happening, and we're pretty sure that we're looking at 5 or 6 million years, but it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly as you go along where something really is. That is a problem, and the stratigraphy is a little bit difficult to date.
What a shame, because that's something that non-evolution supporters will leap on.
Well, yes. I mean, I think we have to remember Compton Bay, where I often go fossiling. Charles Lyell and who sort of one of the founders of modern geology.
I've been to his museum in Edinburgh.
Well, he was originally up there, but and in Scotland. I mean, he was Scottish.
Scotland's not very good for fossils. It's mostly igneous rather than sedimentary.
Yeah, although there's the Isle of Skye, which is doing great things at the moment. But he came down and lived in Hampshire as a schoolboy, so he frequently came over to the Isle of Wight. it was riding along Compton Bay. He sort of realized he could see the whole of the early Cretaceous going out from these terrestrial beds to these marine transgressions, and then into the deep sea of the chalk. And of course, it's all there. It's such a huge distance. You'd have to put an enormous amount of time for these sediments to have fallen, and that's when he realized that proved really that these teeth that Gideon Mantell had found, these reptiles, really weren't just from recent times. They were from deep time. So
yes, Lyell was pretty much the originator of the concept of deep time, I believe.
Yes, I think so. Yes, this concept of uniformitarianism, where assuming that sediments laid down then at the same rate as they do now, then it has to be this sort of age,
the oldest on the bottom, and subsequent
and all the rest of it. Yes, nice principles, but a lot of it are all thought out on the Isle of Wight as well. So
yes.
nice.
Well, we need to trumpet this, because the Isle of Wight needs to have a big flag holding up as this is where it all happened. So how do you see the future? What's going to go on? Is the Isle of Wight going to achieve fame as Dinosaur Isle and tourist attraction, or what?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think we're in a sort of dinosaur renaissance now. The universities have loads of students who want to do paleontology now, and a lot of them are interested in dinosaurs. All the new technologies that are available to us now, CT scanners and what we can do with computers, are sort of bringing new insights into old bones, and so it's all catching on. And I for me, this has huge advantages for the island, for tourism, but also for education, attracting universities onto the island and trying to get some sort of campus field work. There's so much that we could do. And we've not just got dinosaurs, we've got mammal fossils, we've got fantastic collections of insect fossils. There's huge variety, and marine fossils as well, and the chalk and the geology. So much we can do, that I think it would be, we really should catch up. I think most parts of the world that would have these resources would be using them for tourism to greater effect. And I think it's possibly just because the islands always had them there, if you know what I mean. We've got dinosaurs in our cliffs.
Not news, is it? So that's the thing.
Yeah, and so we're forming a trust, and I think that's the way to go forwards. I think the museum. The council's running it. I'm not, it was a great moment when that opened. That was another milestone. But the current museum, we've got so much material now, and so many, we've had 5 new dinosaurs in the last 18 months, and we've got more to come in next year. And this makes us more than just a little provincial museum, and that, we're starting to get a very important, internationally important collection. And I think it's natural to go on to the next stage now, which is, and I think a trust would do that really well, because I think that would bring together people who really are passionate about this, and together with the universities, Natural History Museum, and people like that. I think we could really develop this into something that would be internationally important.
It sounds really exciting. I did my first degree at Portsmouth University, which is supervising your PhD, a long time ago. And the university has moved on in leaps and bounds since then. But would you see a Isle of Wight outpost of Portsmouth University maybe on?
Well, yes. I think that's something. I won't preempt what Portsmouth would do in a way, but I think we've got a phenomenal. I think Portsmouth has a really vibrant paleontological department now. and it's lovely. I was working with some of the students doing their masters and things like that. It is, and we've got so many projects on the islands that they can use, so much material that can be used. And I think Portsmouth is really well placed with the Isle of Wight. It's also, of course, got your Jurassic Coast not far away, and we've got the Kimmeridge and Steve Etch's collection, things like that. So there's an awful lot going on around it. So that's really good for it. So I think a field centre would be a really useful thing, because that can be used for geology. There's ecology, there's the marine side of things. There's so much that could be done there that could link into universities. And I mean, there's Southampton as well. That they've got a paleontology department. So we could actually start to see a campus. And I think that'd be really good for the island to have a sort of university feel on it.
Field centres, what a good idea! Yes. Well, many years ago, when I was still a boy on the Isle of Wight, it was also the location of the British space effort, which is not far from you, just down the road a bit.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And I was shown round it, and the staff there put on an exhibition of high test peroxide, H2O2. But purified up to about 97% or something, which is very unstable. And so this work person donned almost a spacesuit, protective clothing, visor, and everything, and was demonstrating to us the power of high test peroxide on the end of a long spoon with a little cauldron at the end of it, and he twisted it, and it was supposed to drop onto the catalyst and go woof. He overdid it, and it was such a loud explosion, such a large explosion, it blew him over, and he had to go off in an ambulance. So I don't know what happened to him, but that at the time was top secret, and I had to be smuggled in as the son of one of the employees in the project.
Amazing. Yes.
And I believe that there's some interest in that site now. I don't know whether it's going to be used for a documentary about Britain's early involvement in the space race, as it then was. But I
don't know if I don't know about it's about a documentary, but no. Yes, I think it was. I think they missed out, because I think it was that they hadn't clicked on satellite, because people were wondering, what's the point of rockets apart from delivering explosives onto another country. That's right. It's but of course with satellite launching, it's a very lucrative business at the moment.
Absolutely, yes. It was, as you say, it was in those days. It was ICBMs, and our version was the Blue Streak, which got static tested on the Isle of Wight and then shipped out to Australia for a launch from the Woomera Desert. Yes. Well, Jeremy, you've been fantastic, and I knew you would be. Very interesting subject to talk about, a very interesting person to talk to. I'm just going to wind the show up now, because it is FreeThought Hour, and we've done 59 minutes. So I want to announce that next week, I can't remember his name offhand, but we have another very interesting academic he's doing postdoc research into not protein synthesis, but the link between DNA and the proteins that are transcribed off the message. So he'll be very interesting to talk to as well. So come and visit us then. And if you come live, you'll be able to chat and join in. In the meantime, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thank you for asking me, John. Thank you so much. Been very enjoyable talking to you.
I've enjoyed it a lot, and I'm honored that you came. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.